Hi there, and welcome. I'm Thomas Canavan, the Chief Operating Officer of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and the Executive Director of the National Law Enforcement Museum. I'm so glad that you're joining us for this special five-part series, Law Enforcement Think Tanks, Shaping the Future of Policing. In these episodes, we'll hear from incredible leaders working behind the scenes to improve law enforcement in ways that we don't often hear about. For many of us, it might seem like policing has always been the way that it is today, but that's far from the truth. What we learn in movies, TV shows, music, and the media rarely captures the full picture. In reality, dozens of organizations led by law enforcement, policy, criminal justice, and public safety experts are constantly shaping and improving the profession. In this series, we'll introduce you to five of these organizations and the leaders behind them. Chris Shung, Executive Director of The Curve, Paul Goldenberg, Senior Fellow at the Miller Center for Policing and Community Resilience at Rutgers University, Ben Heyman, Executive Director of the Center for Public Safety and Justice at the University of Virginia, Jim Bierman, founder of the Future Policing Institute, and Rosa Brooks, co-director of the Center on Innovations in Community Safety at Georgetown University. Each guest brings a unique perspective and decades of experience. Their stories will challenge assumptions, spark new ideas, and highlight the work being done to keep communities safe. Each of our guests' bios and links to their organizations can be found in the episode descriptions. Also, we recorded one introduction for the whole series, so when you start the next episode, you can skip directly to where our conversation begins. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the conversations. All right. Well, thank you, Paul, for being with us today. It is a pleasure to speak with you, and we're so appreciative of your time and all of the conversation that we're about to have.
Thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have tremendous respect for the museum and the good work it does, and reminding not only the American people but everybody else about how important our work is. So, thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to touch on a lot of topics today, but I want to start first with a little bit about your early years, where you grew up, and how you became interested in law enforcement.
So, I grew up in a pretty infamous place. The reason I call it infamous, it was known. I think it was in a few of the historical books out there as the most populated square mile in the United States, if not the world. It's Irvington, New Jersey, which is an island in itself, surrounded by Newark, New Jersey, the big brother slash big sister. So very populated. 1 square mile at the time that I lived there, we had nearly 100,000 people. We were extremely blue collar. We were America's America, a microcosm of Polish, Jewish, African American, Italian. I can go on and on and on. I grew up off the avenue, which was a typical avenue that had wasn't even a main street. It was an avenue that had the bagel shop, the Chinese restaurant, the Italian deli, and I can go on and on there as well. It was a remarkable place to grow up because I can't even begin to tell you how many languages we grew up on. You have the picture of usually the grandmothers, who many were immigrants, with the brooms out in front cleaning the stoops on the street. So that's how far back I go. So
Awesome. And how did you get into law enforcement?
it was it. I have to be candid. It was not that I wanted to go into law enforcement. I didn't aspire to be a cop my entire life. Growing up in Irvington in the inner city, particularly back in those days, it was post Newark riots. There was a lot of tumult in the city at the time, and uh, uh, it was changing in many ways. It became a very busy place from the standpoint of higher crime, et cetera. It was in transition. So for me, I originally wanted to, when I got out of high school, I was hoping to go to law school. I was debating everybody in high school. So I figured I might as well try to make a living out of it. And back then they had a program called LEAP, whereby if you signed on to policing, there was the potential that they would pay for a portion of your college and university. So that's what I was hoping for. So I didn't go on thinking that I was going to make a career out of it. And of course, quite the contrary, that's exactly what happened. And that's how I started. I was a beat cop. I'll go back so far that when I walked what was called Springfield Avenue, which is one of the busiest avenues in New Jersey, it went from Irvington all the way down to Broad Street in Newark. Um, uh, we still had call boxes with phones in them,
Hmm.
and we had walking beats. Which, by the way, I've had a pretty disparate career, and I will tell you that's probably the best year in policing in many ways that I ever had. It was
Hmm.
the closest I ever came to really working with the folks that I was responsible for protecting. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, when we went into police cars and came off the beats, policing did transition and change. So, but we can talk about that later.
Sure. So what was the department that you started with?
Irvington Police Department.
Oh,
It
so where you were from?
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh-huh.
went on where I graduated high school. I went to college at first Jersey City State, and then ultimately Kane College, which are universities that are nearby. So it was convenient for me. Yeah. So I started my career where I graduated high school.
Oh, wow. Excellent. And so then talk to me about the New Jersey State Attorney's Office. When did you start working there? How long were you a beat cop for? And then what was your transition into that office?
Interesting transition. So we'll take a moment on that. So I was a beat cop for a year and a half. I walked a beat, and then I went into a squad car for a year and a half. So I spent a few years in uniform, and ultimately I was how do I say this? I was approached by a group of folks out of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, through one of my lieutenants, who had a very good friend down in Miami-Dade. And I was asked at that time, very few had any college at all. And I was asked at that time, because I was still at the university, if I would be interested in relocating to South Florida to join a new burgeoning task force, South Florida task force. Um, I was just getting married and making $11,000 a year. They nearly doubled my salary. They said if you can make it through the hiring process, which back then was polygraph, psych, and a lot of other things, and it was pretty competitive because every police officer back in the 70s, 80s, not every, but many were hoping to go to South Florida, the palm trees, the aqua blue water,
Hmm.
and I think the Miami Vice TV show just started, so everybody was looking at Don Johnson and going, yeah, that's for me.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk about that in a second because I have a story about that. So,
Yeah.
I went through the process. I took the test and didn't know how I was going to do, and I made it through the process and was offered a position, higher salary, and hoped to then maybe go back to. I was hoping to apply for some law schools. I was just getting married. My lovely fiance said, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's go." So I wound up leaving Irvington and heading down to South Florida, where I thought I went out back then. The store was called Two Guys Department Store. You're too young to remember it, but a lot of people in their 60s and 50s remember it. And I went out and I think I spent as much money as ever on a suit, which was probably about $59, and bought a suit which I barely wore back in those days, and uh, thought that I would be driving a diplomat. I'd have a gold badge, and I would be a special agent in South Florida, and with a huge increase, and I was on my way. So here's how the story goes. Made it through all the process. Uh, Bought a condo with the money from our wedding and some help from family and friends and the little that we put together, and went down there a month before and anticipating the day that I was going to be sworn in. and made a special agent of this new South Florida strike force, which they were what they did is they recruited from all over the country, young officers. And the reason they did it this way, Tom, was because I hate to say this, but there was so much corruption in Florida at the time. The cartels or the Colombian cartels and others were coming in with tons of cash, and there was unfortunately some of the policing agencies down there were not behaving the way that they were supposed to. So that's why they recruited from outside to take in these young 2-3 year police officers to come from that were unscathed, no connection to South Florida.
What was the agency?
Sorry?
What was the agency?
It was 4 agencies. It was the feds, the ATF, it was FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the sheriffs, and I was paid. They had to figure out how to pay us, and we were paid through the sheriff's office, so that as a mechanism for the administration. But we were also sworn as U.S. Marshals back in those days to give us the federal context. You'll see where I'm going with the story. I go down there. I'm ready. I put on my 2 guys department suit, my best tie, my only tie. I walk in there and ready to raise my right hand and get sworn into my new job. I'm so proud. I'm going to have a gold shield. And, wow, and they look at me and they say, "Mr. Goldenberg, you failed the polygraph."
Oh.
And I went, "Wait a minute. I didn't fail the polygraph. They told me I passed it," because everybody was failing the polygraph. Everybody was failing the polygraph for the same reason. Every young guy that was coming in lied and said they never smoked pot in college. I gave it up. Yep, I'm on a national podcast.
Yeah.
I went, I partook a few times. Okay, so Paul Goldenberg just admitted it. I hope that there's no kids listening. But I did. Look, that was the only thing that I needed to worry about. So I says, yeah, well, and I passed. They go, "Well, you passed. You're the only one that admitted it. Everybody else lied.
Right.
Maybe you were just the dumb one to admit it." I go, "Wow, So, Tom, what happened was they said, "Well, you failed the polygraph, Mr. Goldenberg. I'm sorry, we're not giving you credentials. You need to go back to New Jersey or do whatever you'd like to do down here." I literally walked out the back door. I was crushed. I was devastated. Back in those days, you don't leave a civil service job. The economy was bad. I was getting married. My future lovely bride was coming my way to spend the rest of my life with me, with the aqua water and the palm trees. I walked out of the building and I was completely confused. If I had a cell phone back then, they didn't even exist. They barely existed. As I walked out of the building, right out of a movie, a van pulls up. 4 of the meanest looking undercovers jump out. One of them with Rastafarian dreadlocks, 2 others with beards, and a female. Badge went up and they said, "Paul Goldenberg, get in the van." Now, I wasn't carrying a weapon, but I'm looking around going, I'm here in Florida 20 minutes and I'm already being kidnapped, right? So I said, what is happening here? They said, "Get in the van. Welcome to SIU." And I spent the next 4.5 years of my life very deep undercover.
Wow.
Very deep undercover. So I spent 4.5 years as a deep undercover. I ran several businesses. I ran a car wash. I ran a bar, a Jamaican bar, and a jewelry store. And my job was I was assigned. My handlers were at the ATF. People say, "Oh, you were the drug guy, right?" I was not the drug guy. I was there to buy arms, run guns for some of the Jamaican. I was one of the first to infiltrate some of these Jamaican gangs back then. Particularly since I was not of the culture, it was not so easy to be accepted into that. And somehow, I infiltrated the gangs, worked them, didn't come up. Didn't poke my head up once. It was 4.5 years. The takedown went down. About 180 people were arrested. I was exposed, very much exposed, and a decision was made to transfer me back to New Jersey. So that's how I wound up at the Attorney General's office. So
Mm.
the Attorney General of Florida called the Attorney General of New Jersey and said, "I got one of your own down here." He's done 4.5 years. I was down there. I did what I needed to do, and very rough on my wife. I mean,
Yeah.
she would have left anyway because she was done. She was done with it, Tom. That was the earring, the hair, the friends that were a bit unsavory, and people just really didn't. I was so deep, people didn't know what I was doing. So
Yeah.
the rumors were he's corrupt, he's a bad guy, he's this, he got fired. That was all out there. I had to deal with that for 4 years until my face wound up on the front page of a paper, and people
Mhm.
went, "Oh, wow, I guess he really was a good guy." So that was kind of my outing, which was good and bad. So I wound up back at the AG's office, and where it wasn't the AG's office, it was actually the prosecutor's office in Middlesex County. And I wound up working intel, street gangs, hate crimes. Back then, it was terrorism, but not the type of terrorism that we were dealing with post 9/11. So that's how I wound up at the prosecutor's office, and ultimately got promoted up to the Attorney General's office.
So, did the people in the building know when they said you're, disqualified from the task force position that you were going to get picked up for this undercover? How did the people in the van know that
It
you
was
were
or- it
available?
was orchestrated. It was Yeah, it's a good question. It was all orchestrated. Yes, they knew because it was four commissioners. It was actually one of them was pretty well known at the time. He went on to become the Attorney General, ran for governor.
Mm,
Bob Butterworth, who was
mm,
my boss, who was a well-known name in Florida. I worked directly for him,
mm,
and it was Bob Butterworth and three commissioners. They knew. They knew, and two of the feds knew. Other than that, there were four of us that were so deep at the time that no one else knew. I wound up in jail twice for warrants. So yeah, no one knew. I mean, no one knew. It was called Operation Pit Stop, and people knew when it was over. But
mm,
I wouldn't recommend it. I know we're on a national podcast
mm.
going under for 4 years is not something that is good for one's mental health. We'll just say that you don't
Well,
commit
my
a
next
sin.
question was going to be what was that transition like for you out from undercover?
So I guess for full transparency, so it wasn't easy. Um, I was a pretty jovial guy, pretty funny. I was a jokester in school, high school, college, whatever. I was that guy, right? Um, and when you come out, it's like the tale of two cities. You come out, you have a very different view of the human factor because you're inside with the criminals, you're inside with the criminal minds, and you actually start to understand why some of these folks do what they do, particularly if they're desperate, if they're feeding families. Don't get me wrong, if they're out there injuring or hurting and harming others, there's no excuse for that. But you do start to understand if some people are they're so desperate, they have no other way than to wind up in that world. You do start to feel something for them because if you don't, I think, you start to question your own humanity. But you start to question trust when you're deep like that all the time. So when I came out, I was not that happy, jovial guy all the time. Um, I thank God every day I'm married to the same woman my whole life. And many of us in this business can't say that. And she was with me. She stuck by me. She guided me when things got a little dark. You start to you start to question. Why am I doing this? But there was definitely an upside, and the upside is you start to also understand and nature of human beings and how they think, and sometimes why they think, and you take those skill sets with you after you come out of those undercover operations, if that makes any sense. But it's a dark place. People
Mhm.
see this. I'll tell you a quick story. This is so I had a Chevy Nova. You can see it in the background there. That was my first undercover car, which was a piece of crap. I finally graduated to a Corvette when my operation did better, but I'm driving that piece of crap Chevy Nova on Biscayne Highway. And I'm in my shabby clothes, and my earring, my hair already was long because you took 6 months to get yourself ready for the
Mm.
UC position. And I'm driving in Miami on the Biscayne Highway, on the Biscayne Bridge, and as I'm driving, I'm on my way to an undercover operation where I'm going to be buying some guns off of one of the Jamaican gangs, and it's myself and an ATF agent behind me that was my shadow. And I'm driving, and I'm going, "Hey, yeah, this is going to be interesting, right? There's 10 of them, a couple of us." And as I'm driving on the other side, I see this Porsche with Don Johnson in it. And the Porsche is all outfitted with cameras and lights, and you can see that they're shooting Don Johnson, Miami
Wow.
Vice, going in the opposite direction. I'm sitting there in my piece of garbage thing that's barely making it, with my at that time my 5-shot aluminum piece of garbage gun that I had, right? And I'm driving, and I'm going, and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at him, and I wave, and he waves back. He waved back at me, and I'm sitting there going, what is wrong with this picture?
Right.
I'm making $18,000 a year. This guy's making $18,000 a minute. So,
Yeah.
and we're both doing the same job, acting, and only I never received an
Sure.
Academy Award for it.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tell you that quick story. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to digress, but
Yeah.
so.
No, that's interesting. Well, I'm very grateful and thank you for your service. I know that was a huge sacrifice, and I'm glad to hear that you made it out okay.
Uh, I did, and the sacrifice really was more for my wife than it was for myself. So they need to be thanked. The spouses need to be thanked. But
Absolutely.
everything worked out. So the career
Yeah.
worked out. Everything was great after that. So.
Great. Well, yeah, so let's get to New Jersey. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about your work there and how your career progressed.
Yeah, so I wound up in Middlesex County, a population of about 1 million people, probably one of the most multicultural jurisdictions in the country, if not the world. One of the largest Asian Indian populations, largest Polish, Italian, African American, Jewish, and the this was back in the 80s and back in the 80s, and back in the 80s, these communities were going through transition. Um, there were a couple of cities. My first assignments were intelligence, where I worked organized crime. Actually, that's where I really, as they say in the business, made my bones. The Sopranos are really a family called the DeCavalcantis,
Hmm.
from Elizabeth, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. And they were a very traditional organized crime family that were very active back then. And I was given the privilege of heading up one of the investigations against the family. At that time, I was assigned to the FBI task force. Again, went back in as they say, as a U.S. Marshal. And for 2 years, really 2.5 years, I was very focused on OC. And because we had a lot of the members lived in our jurisdiction, but they were operating outside the jurisdiction. So they established a multi a multi task force to address OC. And it was fascinating because this is the real traditional OC stuff that you see, and the Sopranos. A lot of it was spot on.
Hmm.
Trust
Wow.
me, in more ways than people can imagine. Even
Mhm.
even even the scenes, even when they were coming over and banging on the surveillance vans. Usually that was us in the surveillance vans, and
Right.
sometimes there were multi jurisdictions, NYPD and the FBI, and we would bang on each other's surveillance vans just to aggravate each other. So I
Right.
mean, there's probably so many sub stories there that could turn into a comedic scene
Yeah.
amongst us, playing back, stealing each other's informants, and
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a derogatory way. Everybody got along splendidly back then. So we worked very well with the bureau back in those days. We worked very well with New York. So I did that, and then this is kind of interesting. So Middlesex County, uh, everybody's backyard started to see this rash of crimes against the Asian community. There were gangs that now were beating up the Asian members of the population who had in Woodbridge, New Jersey, they had an entire street of their businesses. It was amazing, really. I mean, restaurants and clothing, and it was thriving for these folks. And some folks resented it and unfortunately started to beat them, break their windows. It was almost out of a bad movie.
Mm.
And the acts of violence really started to grow in number. Back then, we didn't know what to. The governor, the attorney general, the prosecutor really didn't know what to do with this. These crimes were misdemeanor crimes, unless it was an ag assault or an assault. So we started to then see something that was quite extraordinary. We started to see vandalism, acts of vandalism in the cemeteries. We have some very large ethnic and religious cemeteries in New Jersey, particularly in Middlesex County, and they were being desecrated. Tombstones were being toppled, graffiti. Again, these were not considered major crimes. It was vandalism. So the local police were saying, we really don't want to investigate these things. I mean, we can't if we can't prosecute them. So I was given an assignment to start trying to figure out how we are going to establish a task force to investigate crimes against these ethnic communities. And I will tell you, for the record, I was not a big fan of this assignment. It's not something I wanted to do. It's not something I aspired to do. And maybe I thought I was a little bit too important to do. Okay. So about a week and a half later, Tom, I got a phone call at about 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night from one of my detectives, one of the detectives that worked with me. And he was in Woodbridge, New Jersey. And he said, "Hey, Paul, I'm sorry to call you at 1 o'clock at night." He goes, "But we just had a massive cemetery desecration here in Woodbridge, New Jersey. There's hundreds of tombstones toppled, swastikas, graffiti." And I went, "Oh, why? It's vandalism. Why are you calling me with this?" He said, "Well, we understand that you got the new task force. The chief wanted me to call you and notify you." So I was like, "Okay, well, send me a report in the morning." He goes, "Oh, by the way, it's the Beth Israel Cemetery." And I went, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "And we got a manifest." He said, "Do you have family buried there?" I said, "I'll be there in 10 minutes." I literally got in my car, my unmarked, uh, put my lights on, which I don't know what compelled me to do that. I was going to a vandalism scene, and I was there in about 20 minutes. And as I got to the cemetery, it was a scene out of, a bad movie. Everything toppled, swastikas, beer cans. And I'm walking around, and I head right over to my father's gravesite, and I went, "Oh, please," and it was okay. They didn't hit it, but that was a moment for me where it was like a punch in the stomach for me. It was, wait a minute, my father, who's served, who was a great American, who born, raised here, never hurt a person in his life, is lying here amongst thousands of others who serve their country, their families, who are human beings at one time. And this this place was attacked for no other reason than the religion of the people that are here. And I have to tell you, that was a defining moment for me with regard to hate crimes. It was, I never quite, even though I'm, for the record, I'm of the Jewish faith. That's no secret. But raised in a very, multicultural environment, it just didn't resonate. And I will tell you, Tom, I left that cemetery that day, and I definitely understood the impact of a crime against a person for no other reason than their religion or color of skin or orientation, and I can go on and on and on. So I took it pretty seriously after that. It was a defining moment for me, and um, I wound up transitioning to taking over the first full-time hate crimes unit in the United States, one of the first in the country. And
Wow.
unfortunately, we were so busy that we had probably 1,000 cases a year. uh, dozens and dozens of arrests. We had ag assaults, major vandalism, terrorist attacks against Sikh temples and synagogues. And when I say terrorist, it was a different type of terrorism back then. They weren't putting off bombs, but they were causing extreme damage, and then sometimes even firing shots into the institutions. So we saw this hate crime enigma just go from almost, I don't want to say zero, there's always been hate crimes, but it just went to a very different place in New Jersey. So my job transitioned, and that's how I became the head of a hate crime unit at the county level in New Jersey.
I want to just ask a quick question going back to the time in organized crime in New Jersey. Was it ever an option for you to go undercover within the mafia, or was that something that you weren't interested in?
No, during the 4 years I was with Middlesex, we did go undercover, but the undercover was a day undercover. It was not long term. The undercover assignments were a couple of days undercover. Maybe being in a bar or sitting in restaurants or taking on a different role, but it was never long term. And to be quite honest with you, I think that some anticipated that's where I was going to go, back to an undercover position, because I was considered at that time a pretty seasoned UC. It's not something I was interested in. I had no interest in doing it again. I really didn't. Candidly, if they would have said, well, you got to do this again, I probably would have said, you know what? I'd rather be a Walmart greeter at this point. Not that, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for my fellow undercovers. Actually, quite so much respect. But it's not something I would recommend, particularly that long term. So to answer your question, we were, I mean, I was bearded, had long hair in that assignment. So it wasn't an assignment where we were in suits. It was 4 years of, but when I got promoted to the AG's office, the position changed a lot.
Sure.
It was a whole different position. Yeah.
Right. What's a typical time that people spend undercover? Is 4 years?
Probably 6 months, 8 months. Some out there will probably argue. There are some that are out there for 2-3 years. The preparation for undercover is much different today. I have visited a lot of the departments around the country, around the world. In Canada, they have very sophisticated programs now that prepare you for the role, prepare the families. Actually, my wife did have to go. She was my fiance, and she did have to go through a training program even back then. But I wouldn't recommend anybody doing more than 8 to 12 months. Anything more than that, but if there's a need to be able to crack a major case or infiltrate a cartel or infiltrate, and God bless anybody who goes undercover with the cartels. It absolutely unequivocally impacts your psyche and your well-being. I'm not going to deny it. I had some PTSD when I came out of it. I mean, I wasn't a raging, but there's trust. There's different issues. I'm being honest with the audience. There's trust issues. There's where you sit, how you sit. I mean, most cops do that anyway. There's body language that's really, you live or die by the body language. You really do. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but if you do it year after year, it has its impact. You grow into it. You don't want to grow into it. You want to be able to grow out of it. So that's my humble opinion.
Yeah. So going back to the hate crimes task force. So what were some of the kind of early accomplishments? I'm curious about the environment at the time. Were hate crimes increasing, or was law enforcement just becoming more aware that they were happening and that there was a different intention behind these crimes than previously thought?
So that's a good question. I'm going to give you an interesting opinion here. the 90s were a strange time. The 90s were when you had I don't want to sound like that old guy, but I am that old guy. You had heavy metal music. You had music was turning very dark.
Mm,
Um, you had these kids that were claiming to be Satanists. You had, social media was starting to make its mark, although the internet wasn't anything like it is now. It actually barely existed, if at all, back then. But the music industry and the video industry were really, really sending some horrible messages to our young people. And I wrote an op-ed. I wrote an op-ed. I think it was for the Washington Post back then, and I got whacked for it pretty hard. But I wrote an op-ed saying we really got to be, I'm not going First Amendment, but we really need to be taking a close look at the video at the video and the music industry that continues to pound these kids with violence. And it was just nonstop back then. And then the video games came to realization, and the video games were literally telling kids, rape, murder, run down cops, kill people. The video games were unbelievable, and this was 28, 29 years ago. And when but you take the video games, the music, both parents were working. They were relying on these mechanisms to keep their kids occupied. You take a small percentage of young, disenchanted, disaffected youth, and they're going to embrace this stuff. And this is before the first active shooter in a school. And I wrote something up that said we're going to start to see these young people behave in real life the way that they're behaving in these environments. And the industry came at me and went, "Oh, you're talking about First Amendment and this and that." And I went, "You know what? Lo and behold, let's see where we are in 25 years from now.
mhm.
In 25 years from now." And I didn't want to be correct. I didn't want to be right, but we were the first to see this transition of our youth that were starting to transition into a very violent environment. And the violence was just being propagated every single day. We used a term back then, it was mind pollution. And it was a continuum. And, where was the reality for some of these young people? So actually, those of us in the early days of watching this transition, to Columbine, we weren't surprised. How did it take that long? And lo and behold, here we are, 2025. We have a generation that just, So the question is it that time in place was very transitional for society, and I believe that our young people were being impacted in a very, very negative way. I'm going to put it out there. I mean, it wasn't just the heavy metal music. Some of the rap music was literally, telling young people go out and rape. And then some of the rappers, the heavy metal folks, and everybody said, "Well, it's only music." Well, you know what? Spend a month with me investigating what we're investigating in the state of New Jersey, and we can assure you that we actually saw the lyrics of some of the music wind up on crime scenes. And I said, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to tell you that there was definitely a correlation between what you're doing over here and these young people taking and embracing this, and now turning it into actual criminality. And this was prior to the social media platforms that we have now. I mean, we can spend days on. I just became aware of a young group about 3 months ago of cutters. They're kids between the ages of 9 and 16. They have their own cutter chats. Who can cut the deepest? Who can make the most blood? Who can cut? If any parent or anyone that had consideration for our children saw these things, it's out there on social media platforms who are making billions of dollars off of this.
Mhm.
Billions of dollars off of this. I mean, not we, but organizations I'm affiliated with have gone to some of these social media platforms and begged them, reconsider, see what this is doing. And They don't even want to talk to us. So we're in the same place we were 25, well, actually 30, 35 years ago, with some of the music labels and the video game makers. So the best they did is they went and they put, mature audiences only, which was like a magnet for every 13-year-old.
Right.
And I'm not talking about healthy kids, but if you have a 13-year-old killing all day, what are we turning our kids into, Tom?
Mhm.
So our unit, you asked a question, we saw a spike in 2 years. In 2 years, we were, again, the state of New Jersey had probably 1,400 hate crimes reported that we knew of. When I took over, when we created the hate crimes office at New Jersey, which then had statewide jurisdiction, I became the chief. Uh, we were doing probably at least 100 arrests a year, if not more. So, and it was for everything from ag assault to major vandalism to attacks on synagogues and churches, and it became pretty serious stuff. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Were other agencies starting to pick up on what you all were doing? Did they agree that this was an issue happening in their area? Was this specific to New Jersey? I imagine that it wasn't. And I can imagine once people started hearing more about these types of crimes, they started connecting the dots, and it was just the tip of the iceberg.
So New Jersey became the model. Literally, we were the first to build out and capture the hate crime stats. We created policies, procedures, investigative methodologies. We really were aggressive. We have 21 counties in New Jersey. Every county had a bias officer that was trained by us. So we did become the model for the rest of the country. That's why I wound up traveling to probably 30, 40 states over a period of a couple of years on behalf of the New Jersey AG. The other attorney generals asked what we were doing and how we were doing it. Not taking anything away from the NYPD. The NYPD had an extraordinary and very active bias crime unit. And actually, I learned a lot from what they were doing over there. So yeah, we did become the model. I was seconded out to Canada, to Toronto and Ottawa and other places throughout Canada, to the various policing services up there to help them create hate crime units. Hate crimes have always been there. They've been there for forever. But because of social media, because of social media platforms, the music industry, the video games. I can go on and on and on. It really started to become almost like a contagion or a virus, and it indeed started to spread. And as more multicultural many parts of our country became, unfortunately, there was always going to be a small part of the population that were going to be incentivized for whatever reason to strike out at the newcomers. The more that we trained the members of the community and the police, the higher the number. And people say, well, that's a bad thing. It's really not. If the local population begins to then trust their police and they're not afraid to step up and report, that's a milestone. A milestone to me is not that you've got 1,000 hate crimes, but you've got people that are willing to report it and willing to trust their police to engage the police. We went through a lot of pain to find out that if we did not address this issue, it was not only a threat to our constituents, a threat to our police, a threat to our image and our reputation. And I'm not looking to go, but it also a threat to democracy. I mean, if people are afraid of their own police or afraid to report, that's not a good place to be. And I will tell you that from the 1990s right up until now, American policing embraced this, in my own humble opinion, has embraced it. They're doing remarkable work out there in this area. And, I admire the great works of a lot of our policing agencies in that area.
What was the time span you were forming this unit and starting to travel and train other departments?
It was 1990s. And then, so for 5, 6 years, not only was I overseeing the state's hate crime efforts, I was responsible for the enforcement, investigations, and working with the prosecutors to make sure they were prosecuted in all 21 counties. I was statewide. I had statewide jurisdiction. And at that same time, DOJ plucked me because of the Attorney General, was close with the AG, and I kind of became the go-to person to travel around the United States, setting up similar types of systems, hate crime, gathering the stats, working with the communities. I built relationships with almost every ethnic group out there, every religious group. We really worked hard to build relationships with the disparate and vulnerable communities. And we took all this and packaged it up and shared it with our law enforcement agencies throughout the rest of the nation. So there are very few states I haven't traveled to where I haven't worked on the ground in some capacity or another over the years, and I continue to do so today.
How was 9/11 impacting your work then at that time?
It impacted my work. Well, 9/11, I took my retirement out and thought I was out. And when
Really? In 2000, 2001?
yeah, I was in the private sector,
Hmm.
and when 2001 hit, the then governor of New Jersey asked if I would come back in as an advisor to help set up the first Office of Homeland Security. Back then, it was going by a different name. So I became very involved in the state's efforts at the governor's level and the attorney general's level. I worked very closely with John Farmer, who was then the attorney general, who went on to head up the 9/11 Commission, and who I say with tremendous regard and respect, I have the honor of working with today. John and I work side by side today. He's the chief counsel over at Rutgers University, but he's responsible for a lot of the initiatives that I'm involved in. So I still work with the same man after all those years. So I went back in as an advisor, and I was then plucked by the senior leadership of the American Jewish community, who has a single organization representing all of the Jewish organizations. As for some reason, after 9/11, a lot of threats were now being focused against the Jewish community of the United States, very serious threats. And there was no real infrastructure for the Jewish community in the United States with regard to training or protecting their facilities or engaging with police. And I was tasked with establishing the first full-time Homeland Security initiative between the American Jewish community and which was then DHS and the FBI. So that was an official kind of ask and an official position. And I went in and spent some years helping build that, which is now called SCAN Secure Community Network, which is a pretty big organization out there. So,
what about the Muslim community following?
Worked very closely with the Muslim community. To this day, I have excellent relationships with a lot of the leaders across the Muslim communities in the United States. We've been friends for 25 years. My role at DHS, ultimately, I was asked to come into DHS under the Obama administration to join the council, which was back then I think it was the Presidential Council for DHS, and it transitioned to become the Secretary's Council. And my portfolio there, in addition to some other CT initiatives, quite a few, over a period of 10 years, I headed up the religious, anything involving attacks or threats against the religious communities in the United States. I was responsible at the council for overseeing those initiatives inside the council. We reported directly to the secretary, and we were the ones that did the reports to U.S. Congress. So Myself and four-star General John Allen and John Farmer and others who were also tasked by the secretaries. I worked for four of them. We traveled literally to almost every single location where there was an attack, a major attack against a community of faith, from Oak Ridge to Pittsburgh to L.A. I can go on and on. So our job was to travel to these locations, meet with the communities on behalf of the secretary. Sometimes the secretary joined us in those meetings, and we did the report, which is a part of congressional record targeting religious communities in the United States. That report can be read at any time online. So my position changed to federal, and I became again responsible for overseeing a lot of the initiatives that focused on building capacity between the government, law enforcement, and communities of faith. That's all the communities of faith. So it wasn't just the Jewish community.
Yeah, let's go back a little bit to what the Homeland Security Advisory Council is and who participates in that and why it was established.
It's called the HSAC. The HSAC, Homeland Security Advisory Council, was established primarily by the White House. It was in the early days a presidential appointee. It was supposed to be made up of 25 to 30 of America's kind of foremost experts, leaders. Originally, it was set up to provide a voice to or advice and counsel from members of Senate, Congress, different federal agencies, state and local senators, governors, corporate CEOs, things of that nature, the heads of major policing associations, and it was supposed to be this sort of premier council that was to level set for the secretary on various issues. It was the position was called an SGE, which they did give it a government designation. So you were really 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So you had to live by whatever restrictions there were as it relates to conflict and things of that nature. So the council has been around since the beginning of DHS. Normally, every secretary that came in absorbed the council. It was considered apolitical. Unfortunately, the first secretary to terminate the council was Secretary Mayorkas, who fired the entire council, reconstituted it about 3.5 years ago, and then again, it was the same council was fired by the new administration. So unfortunately, that was precedent that I didn't think needed to happen, but that's my own humble opinion.
So up to that point, there were the same people on the board.
They would come and go. I mean, you would serve 3 years. I think it was 3 years, maybe, and either they would keep you or they would elect to just bring on somebody new. But it was primarily, I was one of the longest term, myself and just a few others. I had nearly 10 years on the council. I was originally appointed by the Obama administration and reappointed by Trump, and of course not reappointed again, which is their right by Mayorkas and his administration. So,
how did the work of the board change as secretaries changed and presidents changed?
That's a really good question because it's interesting, and we did see changes. It really, unfortunately, some of it was driven by politics. So, during the Obama administration, a lot, and I'm not being critical of the administrations, but during the Obama administration, the focus of the council shifted from when you thought about terrorism or counterterrorism, it shifted from Islamic terrorism, right, coming from Islamic extremist groups. I want to be clear, not Islamist people or culture. It shifted, and a lot of the focus was on white supremacists.
Mm.
And particularly again during the former administration, almost all of it was on focus on white supremacists, and no one has a concern more than I do about white supremacists for many reasons. But I kind of was not in total agreement with shifting an entire way that you focus your investigations or focus your efforts from one potential extremist group to another. And if that happens, then what happens is what we saw happen. None of this ever goes away. It just gives people a reprieve.
Mm.
So I just think my messaging here is we have to be very careful, as much as we don't want to, it happens, to politicize these councils or commissions, because they're built for independence, and they're built for providing what's supposed to be an objective opinion concerning the national security of the nation to the leader of DHS. So we just have to be careful on that, because when one DHS secretary over another says, you know what, we're just going to completely shift now and now be completely focused on a threat coming from another group. Well, what sometimes they don't understand, there's 250,000 people or whatever the number is in DHS. Everyone shifts.
Mm.
Everyone. That's the power of a DHS secretary. We just got to be cognizant of the threats are coming from where the threats are coming from. You can't politicize the threat. It's a reality, and you have to deal with that threat as it is. If you deal with these threats politically, you get what you're going to pay for, and we're going to be a much unsafer place. So again, white supremacists are a threat, but we can't take our eye off the ball either on threats that are emanating from Middle Eastern states or parts of Africa, or even parts of our own communities here in the United States.
What were some of the policies or initiatives that you put forward that impacted DHS or agencies throughout the United States?
The one I'm probably most proud of is the report that we did on threats against targeted threats against religious communities. There was a real bad couple of years from probably 2018 to 2022, 23, where we saw the Sikh temples being attacked, where people were being murdered right up on the pew or in their seats. We saw attacks against AME churches. We saw attacks against synagogues. This transitioned. Over the years, we literally saw how it went from graffiti on religious institutions to military style attackers, assassins in full military gear, walking into our religious institutions, which are supposed to be the most safest, sacred places. And I always said, because I traveled to Europe, and I watched in Europe 13, 14 years ago how the army had to encircle synagogues, and they had to encircle some churches in Paris and in Belgium and in Brussels and in Stockholm. And I watched these are democratic states where people are supposed to be able to freely pray. You take that right away from people in a democratic society, and you are heading down a very bad path as a nation. And I had a chill down my spine when we used to visit these institutions in Europe when I was assigned over to Europe through the OSCE, the Office for Security and Cooperation for Europe. And my job there was to assess the capacity building between police and these vulnerable communities. The OSCE is a very large security body that's governed by the 56 states. And my job there was to head up this police matters unit. And I came back to America and I said, this won't happen here. We can never let that happen here. The day that a Jewish an American person of Jewish faith is afraid to walk down the street to their synagogue, or someone who is American, or doesn't, if they're Muslim and they're here living in the United States, is afraid to go to the mosque, or afraid to go to a Sikh temple. I can go on and on and on. That changes everything for America. That's going to change everything for America, because we are so dedicated to our faith. And take that right away, and now we start to think about when and where we can travel to our religious institutions. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. And we started to see it happen. 2016, 17, 18. We saw the vandalism and the assaults turn to military style violence. As someone that has traveled the country, representing DHS on that effort, meeting with police executives and chiefs, it terrified them as well. And that's why I'm very proud of my profession. I'm very proud of my fellow men and women in law enforcement, the executives. The majority, if not all, have been working feverishly for the past 10 years to ensure that they are building capacity with communities that they consider vulnerable within their own jurisdictions. There's been a tremendous amount of work done there. So getting back to, would we ever see that here? We do. We have. We in the past few years now, millions of dollars have had to be redirected to stand guard of our synagogues, of our Sikh temples, of our mosques. So something's gone a little awry. It's an issue. So we cannot politicize the flavor of the day of who's the most extremist. We really can't. And law enforcement can't afford to do that either. We don't have the resources. So we've got to be very careful with making sure that this doesn't become a political event. Protecting our religious institutions here and our communities of faith is essential.
So I guess I'm kind of putting a couple of thoughts together here as the types of crimes have gotten worse. And you hear a lot of people criticize law enforcement departments receiving military grade equipment, weapons, tanks, other types of weapons. Does it seem justified to you, given what you know about the way these crimes have changed over time?
Post Floyd was a reckoning. It was a real reckoning for the American law enforcement community. There's no doubt about that. There was a lot of reflection, and we find ourselves now in 2025 in a very, very, very precarious place. And I'll get back to your question in a second. We now have departments that can't find suitable candidates that want to be police officers anymore. There isn't a day that goes by I don't talk to an agency that says, I used to have 2,000 people for 100 positions, or 1,000 people for 10 positions, or and even with sign-on bonuses. So we have come to a place in the United States where policing was beat down so much. I think a lot of it undeserved. You have, I'll say this, you have 1 million people, 1 million realtors, 1 million doctors, 1 million lawyers, a million accountants. You're going to have, the human factor is what the human factor is. You're going to have some people that aren't going to behave well, or are going to commit crimes because they're not wired correctly, or whatever the reason is. That's the numbers. The difference is those people aren't under a microscope, and we have been under a microscope. We behaved pretty well over the years and done the best we can under the conditions that here in this country have changed from time to time. COVID, imagine a time, and we'll go back to the question again, but imagine a time or a place where you call 911 and no police officer shows up at your door anymore. It's almost like that light switch that we always believe will always go on until we find out there's a power failure for 3 days. you know. So it's just how much can the law enforcement community take? You know, the media painted them into a corner. It, police officers went through a very horrific time in the past 4 or 5 years, and just most of it, just undeserved. Um, so when we go back to, do we take the tools that they need to keep the constituents safe? Here's what I'll say. Our children are our most precious natural resource. When a shooter goes into a school, we are hoping and praying that our police get there quickly and have the tools that they need to stop that animal from killing our children. And lo and behold, there are many within these communities that said, let's take everything from them. Okay, until the first shooter shows up. So my own humble opinion is that the police are outgunned, outarmed. We're going to see a day, and I hope it never happens. Mumbai was a wake-up call in India, where modern hotels were attacked by well-trained terrorists. If we don't have the tools to stop a single 18-year-old shooter, or the training to stop an 18-year-old shooter who can still take out 20, 25 of our kids, or somebody just going to work in a supermarket in a single day. Imagine if we have 40 or 50 Kandahar trained terrorists that show up in one of our malls, or show up in one of our universities, and are opening up on people, and the community decided to remove all the firepower from the local police that they needed to make some kind of dent in the bad guys or girls' armor. Where are we going to be then? So it's a pendulum, and the pendulum, I hope, is swinging back a little bit, where the constituents, the citizens, realize we need to. We talk about democracy. I hear the word democracy in every conversation. Democracy, democracy. Without the police, we don't have any democracy. Without our police, without those men and women showing up every day and risking their lives, and some of them even shaking their heads going, what am I doing here now? Without them, where's the democracy? And I've traveled to Bosnia, Kosovo. I've been in Eastern Europe. I've been in the Mideast. I've been in Africa. I've seen where the police are not always what they should be. And let's see how that addresses the challenges of what we call democracy. So if I sound passionate about that, our police deserve a lot more than what they have seen. Now, I know there's a lot of constituents out there and citizens that do appreciate us, but it's sometimes a no-win scenario.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your work in Europe. You were part of the OSCE group, the
OSCE.
organization OSCE.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Office for Security and Cooperation for Europe.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So what was that work like, and how did you alluded to it already, but what you saw, what you were working on there, what were some of the goals there, and then what was the impact back here in the United States?
So the Office for Security and Cooperation for Europe is it's an unknown to many Americans. It's a 56 nation, maybe even 57 now, 57 nation. It's much like the EU, European Union. However, it's the security arm. So you're only a member unless you're an ambassador. But the organization itself has got thousands and thousands of people. The OSCE deploys on the ground in Kosovo, Bosnia, places where there's trouble. They work towards democratization. They work very heavily in Eastern Europe. And my job, thanks to Chris Smith, who was our congressman here in New Jersey, he was the chairman of what's called the Helsinki Commission, which is the Human Rights Commission. And about 16, 17 years ago, they started to see, they were concerned that many of the Eastern European policing agencies were not we're not doing enough to protect vulnerable communities. Vulnerable communities, i.e., were Muslim communities, Jewish communities, Roma, which are referred to as Gypsy, which is not considered a very positive name, and as well as others. And my job was to oversee a group of an amazing group of 9, 10 senior law enforcement officials from Hungary, Russia, the UK, Canada, France, Belgium, Germany. It was a permanent group that was established for a 4-year run, and our job was to build capacity between vulnerable communities and the police within these agencies. Every one of us had police backgrounds, so we were very well accepted by the national police agencies. We weren't considered a threat to them. We weren't, some group coming in to tell them what to do or how to do it. We were fellow multinational law enforcement executives ourselves that were coming in to do everything we could to work with them. So we did really. I'm very proud of the work that we did in Kosovo, Bosnia. We helped build what was adopted by the EU as the definition of hate crimes. We helped build the statistical processes on how they gather statistics in hate crimes across Europe. We worked in Belgium post-terrorist attack. Myself, John Farmer, and others spent 2 years on and off in Belgium after the terrorist attacks in Belgium at the request of the Belgian police. We're on the ground right now, not part of the OSCE. That assignment ended after 4 years. And all the work I do now internationally is done through my work at the Rutgers University Miller Center for Policing, where I proudly work with Rick Fuentes, former colonel of the New Jersey State Police, as I mentioned, John Farmer, Mark Cinatempo, and others. And we are working in Canada right now on various issues on the border. So we're extremely proactive still to this day, and doing what I feel is some really, really tangible work.
The Roma population is an interesting group. Do you know much about how law enforcement is working with Roma and what that relationship is like?
So we're very proud. This is, people say, what kind of milestones did you have in Europe? There was not one Roma police officer in the Hungarian police force. Not one. They now have a colonel who is a Roma police officer that we worked with to get hired by the Renderség, the Hungarian police.
Wow.
So that was the work that we did behind the scenes. Roma community did not trust the police. There were some very challenging events that were going on in Hungary and Romania, and in some of the other Eastern European countries. Police relations between the communities was not good. We did a tremendous amount of work there. I personally traveled into some of the Roma camps in these countries alongside my Hungarian police brothers and sisters who I'm tight with today, some of which are in very senior positions there now. And we did a lot of work on the ground in Hungary. We spent 1.5 years on the ground there. And as a result, you now have a colonel in charge of a very substantial unit who's Roma, as well as many Roma officers that are now part of the Renderség.
Well, I used to live in the Czech Republic. The neighborhood I lived in, there was a pretty substantial Roma community. So it's an interesting group of people with a very interesting history, and they're spread all over the world.
They are, and unfortunately, in a lot of the countries where they are, there are not always good relations between themselves and sometimes the police. And that has been a work in progress, and to this day is still a work in progress between the communities. It's a transient community, so it's
Right.
it's not like other minority communities. This community is very transient, so it's tough. It's tough to and also in a lot of the other minority communities, you have leaders that are traditional leaders that represent the communities, and within the Roma community, it's been a challenge sometimes to navigate through that process. Although we have been successful at times and have done some decent work over there, particularly Hungary.
So you mentioned Rutgers. I want to talk about Rutgers a bit, as in depth as we can go. So this series is, focused on law enforcement think tanks, policy centers, organizations that are researching and helping advance the law enforcement profession. So tell us a little bit about the Miller Center, how it was established, and their role within the law enforcement community.
So the Miller Center, as it is now, was established really five, maybe 6 years ago. No, actually more than that, about 7 or 8 years ago. Thanks to our benefactor and somebody with vision, Paul Miller. Yeah, John Farmer leads the Miller Center. He's former Attorney General.
In the
He
Miller
was
Center, there's several different programs within the Miller Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You have the Miller Center that's focused on community, vulnerable communities and resilience, and then you have the center that's it's all under one center, but the other section is policing. I work in both sides.
Mhm.
Uh, we have a legendary figure here that first created the policing center at Rutgers. His name is Tom O'Reilly. There aren't too many people out there. If you're out there in the business for 40 years, you know who he is.
Mhm.
Tom was at Justice, and he is a legend. God rest his soul. We lost him a few years back. But Tom was the one that really was the architect behind the center. So the policing center, we look. What does a policing center do? People try to figure it out. They ask me all the time, what does a policing center do? Um, Ours is different because we're operational. We're literally on the ground. Most policing centers are organized and developed to assist police executives and agencies to better navigate and or figure out how to go through what I'll refer to as challenging times or tough times or challenging issues. AI is an example. Right now, we're creating what we believe will be the first AI Center of Excellence for public safety out of the Miller Center, working with Aegis. Everybody knows who that is, IJIS. And we're doing that because we know that our police executives are being inundated with AI. And what is AI? What is this mystery? Much like cybersecurity 20 years ago or social media platforms 10 years ago. And our goal is to help them navigate through that, provide training on AI, to provide some vetting for them so they can better understand, how to navigate through the vendors. We're not picking any particular vendor, but how to navigate through the vendors. Um, Big issue right now is drones. And I'm not digressing. We're talking about think tanks. So we ran a think tank on drones about 4 years ago, and we're completely blown away when we found out that 85% of the drones in the air are being piloted by police, and they're Chinese manufactured. So we went, what? And the reason I mention that is that Chinese manufactured drones are still very much in the air, flying over our infrastructure, and being piloted by American police because the police agencies don't have the funds to pay for drones that are manufactured here in North America, i.e., Canada or the United States, or by a friendly, and they're being forced into buying these drones. And at the same time, the drones are good, they're cheap, and they're good. They're built by the Chinese Communist Party and military, and they're cheap because they're subsidized by the Chinese Communist Party. And we still have American police executives going, I don't care. We don't care. It's cheap. They're better. My guys and my gals like it. Well, we're pretty close to getting into an adversarial situation with the Chinese. So we think these things through, and we say, look, how can we address and navigate? Do we need more funding? We need more money for this. How do we we're not lobbyists, but what do we do to address these issues? So we're operational and in every way, and I'll give you an example. So right now we are.
Is the concern with the drones the same as like TikTok or Chinese manufactured cell phones?
No.
This threat of being able to use the data and spy on activities.
Yeah. The concern is there a backdoor? We don't know 100% for sure, even if there's a 1% that there's a backdoor, which many believe there is. These drones are being flown over nuclear facilities, research facilities, military bases. They're being flown over our tunnels, our bridges. They're being flown over our human capital. We spent $2 million on a single missile to shoot down a balloon off of the coast of Charleston. And right now, on any given day, we've got 100,000 drones flying in the air, piloted by our own cops, which potentially could be going back to the Chinese. I can't figure it out.
Right.
I really can't. So as a think tank, it's almost like the think tank, but what does make us different is we are on the ground. We are working with the National Sheriff's Association for the last 3 years on a program called From the Border to the Backyard. We work with Sheriff Mark Daniels, who's the chair of the Border Committee. We're very proud of the work that he does and proud of the work that we're doing with him. We help them navigate through information sharing, real-time information sharing, by literally being on the ground there. Right now, we're working on the northern border with our colleagues from the OPP, RCMP, through our work at the National Sheriff's Association, and we're a fresh set of eyes, right, with no skin in the game, with no agenda, no political. We're not pulled politically either way. So to work with us has its advantages. We will do reports. We are involved in some consent decrees. Our work in Sweden, we're very proud of. We've been on the ground in Sweden for 5 years. Sweden has been seeing just a dramatic rise in gang violence and crime, gun violence. They didn't know how to deal with this violence. We brought over no less than 25 senior police executives, helped fund it, from ATF, New Jersey State Police, New York State Police. I can go on and on. And we are working side by side with our colleagues in Sweden, where we're providing methodologies, technologies. We're providing them with processes. We train them, and that work continues. We're going to be working on the ground in Germany. We were on the ground in Belgium, where we brought the Muslim community together with the Jewish community, who were very concerned about each other post museum attack a few years back. We do these only at the request of the National Police. We do not go unless we were invited in by the National Police. I want to be clear on that. We don't show up at anybody's door and go, we're here. So our work is literally operational. We oversee the I-95 working group, which is the single largest assembly of police executives from Montreal and Ottawa down to Key West, Florida. We just had one a few weeks ago, extremely successful. We focused on the corridor. So our work is a physical labor. We go in as practitioners. We just don't go in as a think tank.
Do departments in the U.S. they reach out to you for help on specific projects? I'm thinking about the drone example. How is the work initiated, and conducted through the Miller Center?
So I'll give you an example. It was the number one story for about a month and a half. The drone debacle.
That's right. Yeah.
Debacle. Yeah.
Yeah.
It originated, really did originate here well, it originated in a few other states, but we kind of went, uh-oh. Give you an example. Once we started to determine that we had some kind of drone issue going on, we working with the New Jersey State Police, we work very closely with our New Jersey State Police through Colonel Callahan. We're very proud of the New Jersey State Police and the works that they do. They're very innovative, so a lot of what we do is collaborative with them. We were asked by the colonel and by several other state police agencies to assemble and convene a working group, which is what we did, to address the issues. We couldn't get any answers. The federal government basically went, "You're crazy, you're seeing things, you're blind in your right eye. What are you talking about? There are no drones in the sky." I'm not kidding you, by the way. I mean, that's pretty much how it went down. And others basically told us that we were crazy and insane. These things were the size of cars. I've seen them myself. And so we assembled this task force, and the feedback from the task force was, "Guys, good job, because at least we're locked in a room for a day." And it wasn't just a day. We continued to communicate 7 state police agencies and communicate with each other, share stories, best practices. The stories coming in were crazy. Our citizenry were petrified. They were. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in resources were being spent to try and chase these things. And all we wanted to do was compel the federal government or somebody to tell us, wink at us with your right eye, move a pen over to the right. If you don't want to tell us, but just move the pen to a right and just go, if that means maybe it's you. So we couldn't get any of that. So finally, the new administration came in. We finally got an answer or two, and we're not as worried about the drones anymore. However, they're still out there, and I understand they're up in Canada now. So that gives you an example of we move quickly, where sometimes policing can't move quickly. Policing sometimes can be so conservative that by the time they need to move on a topic, that topic is either moved out or it's become so dangerous where it's overcome so we can move fast. And again, we move apolitically and we move with no agenda. So we're not looking for, we're just looking to do the right thing. And our access to expertise is just absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you need an expert, we'll find them. And these experts aren't looking for attaboys or pats on the back. A lot of them are recently retired, and they're looking to just do the right thing for their brothers and sisters out there, and provide access to law enforcement agencies in need. I.e., working through wellness right now, working through retention and recruitment. You want to talk about, and you heard me say it earlier, a threat to American democracy that hasn't been discussed? 2 words: retention and recruitment. If we don't have the cops, in 2 years, 36 months, where are we going to be as a nation? Where are we going to be? And there's a lot of angst. We haven't yet wrote the book. There's no playbook on how the military and how local policing are going to operate together if things get really tough out there. We're not even thinking about it. We need to be thinking about it.
What does recruitment and retention look like in some of the other countries that you worked with? Is this a specific U.S. problem right now, or is it everywhere?
It's everywhere. Canada's seeing it. The Great Britain is really in dire need. Their system's not that dissimilar to ours. The UK, these other countries are starting to see it. You say, okay, recruitment and retention are also driven by economics. We saw that not necessarily here in the United States when people were offering $60,000 sign-on bonuses. You know, I spoke to a sheriff just a few months ago, I'm sorry, a few months ago, that said, I've got spanking brand new, beautiful police cars sitting in my parking lot, and I don't have people to drive them. What does that mean to the constituents?
Mm.
You know, we take for granted our 911 operators, who are trained, highly trained, in many cases polished. They save lives out there. They're shutting down, going, why am I doing this? For what?
Mhm.
So we need to really have a reckoning in this country and really, really better understand how critical, how important our police are to maintaining our peace and our democratic values. Um, they're the end all, wear all in many cases. If the military's got to come in, it's over. It's
Mhm.
over. I don't mean for a local crisis, or I don't mean for, thank God the military comes in if you got a tornado that wiped out, 5 cities. That's different. That's not what I'm saying. But if the military has to come in to replace the police because they're not there anymore, that's clicking that light switch on and everybody believes it's there,
Mhm.
but that light's going to go on.
Mhm.
American public needs to be thinking about that.
So do you have an opinion, I'm sure you do, on why recruitment is so challenging?
Yeah, I do have an opinion why recruitment is so challenging. I think the media has done a great job beating the hell out of our men and women in blue and green, uh, just beating them down, just beating them down. I also believe that there are people who, for their own personal gain, politicians that chose to target what they see as an easy target, which is the police, to for all of the ills of society, for all of the anger. The police and all their manifestations, we are the face of the government, right? I mean, we are. When you get stopped on that roadway, that's the government in your mind by some people. That's the whole government. So a lot of the angst and the anger has been focused on the police, and I think that that's taken its toll. And I think this young generation that's coming up now, the issue is not only do they want to serve their communities as police officers. I'm going to create a little bit of a stir. I also represent what's called the GCLET, the Global Consortium for Law Enforcement Training Executives, which is the new organization representing over, when I say representing, aggregating, assembling 300 plus police academies out there to share best practices. What we're hearing is a nightmare. A lot of the young folks out there, a lot of their muscles are in their thumbs. Like, that's
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
And they may look okay, but their body weight is just, I mean, they can't make it through the physical tests.
Mm.
So we also see a generation that's not making it through the physical tests. This is a generation whose head is down on social media. Are they going to pass those polygraphs? Are they going to pass those psychiatric exams? So it's a greater society issue. It's not just about whether the media is beating us down, but we've got a multitude of real challenges there. And if they all come to, a single place, in 36 months, we could be in a bit of trouble. We really could be. So what happens then?
What about the idea that the risk is too high to your personal safety as a law enforcement officer? Are there ways that uh, what do we need to do to reduce that risk? A lot of people talk about the number of firearms in the United States, right? Like however many per capita most, in the world. And I think about the situations that law enforcement officers put themselves in and the risk that they face for a generation who are behind their phones and very risk averse, perhaps. How can we mitigate that risk as a society? I mean, what are some of the approaches we can take ourselves, right, as a democracy create laws that don't rely on law enforcement to do everything.
We've come to rely on law enforcement to do everything, to your point. So when you say risk, in my day, the risk used to be, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get wounded? Am I going to wind up in a bad situation at a domestic? You know, I mean, did I think about it every day? I did not. If I thought about it every day, I wouldn't have gotten in my police car. The risk now is, my God, if I get out of that car, I'm going to be videotaped, potentially put on charges, fired by my department. Will I have the support of my department? Will I have the support of legal counsel? Because right now they're trying to take everything away from me that protects me in any way as a police officer. If I'm going to potentially lose my house, my family, because of liability issues. Now, I'm not saying people are going to say, well, we can't protect, the police shouldn't be protected 110%. Nobody's being put. You know what, though? You go put a gun on every day. You go do what they do every day, and then talk to me about whether you think you need protections or not from a liability standpoint. I'll call it walk in my shoes. So what the risk now is the legal risk. And that's why we're seeing, the old cliche is you're getting what you want. We're seeing less stops. We're seeing less activity, not because they're not good cops or they believe or they're good human beings or they're dedicated to the profession. They're scared. They're scared. They're not scared of risking their lives for another member of the public. There isn't a cop that I met. They're worried about their future. They're worried about their mortgage payment. They're worried about, that's what they've done to them, to us. So if we need to rethink, how do we reassure our most precious natural resource, which are our cops, our police, those who are sworn to protect us every single day, we better start providing them with the support that they need. And that's even including mental health right now. In my day, we talk about mental health. None of us, if we were out, if we drank too much or did this or that, none of us would go forward for help. We wouldn't. It was called the jacket. Man, you were scared of that jacket. Anything goes in that jacket, you're in trouble. Now it's tenfold. It's tenfold today. You have a public that sometimes isn't there for you. They feel sometimes the politicians aren't there for you. It's all starting to add up. It used to be money. It used to be about money, where they would rethink whether they want to stay or not. They're not, because I'm not going to tell you in every single case across the country they're being paid great. They're not, but it has gotten better. Thank God, it's gotten better for the cops. It's no longer, do I have the support and can I keep this up? Can I keep this up? Because I'm afraid to get out of my car. I'm afraid, not because I'm a coward or I'm afraid to take a bullet for a constituent or defending another officer. It's because I'm afraid of what the outcome may be if I say the wrong thing, if I twitch the wrong way, now again, I know that there is going to be people watching this and go, wow, man, he just wants them to have everything. No, but right now we're in a very tough place and we need to rethink where policing, where we had pushed policing. Last but not least, to your point, when we talk about the tools, right? The fact is that it is much more dangerous these days because people are more heavily armed. They want to take away our heavy arms from us. People are radicalized from flash to bang in a day versus months, and we're dealing with a society right now that is really, it's not the same place it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, Tom. So we expect our police to be the ones that are going to hold the fort, and at the same time we're asking them to hold the fort. We're not giving the fort the resources that they need or the support that they need to keep that spirit de corps.
Mhm. So what could a member of the community do? I think it's one thing to say that you support law enforcement, but what would be an actionable approach that a community could take in order to help protect law enforcement and get them the resources they need?
Well, it's a two-way street. I started this 2 hours ago, almost 2 hours ago, by talking about some of my best days in policing were the days I walked a beat. You want to know why, Tom? Because I knew everybody's name. They knew my face. They knew a little bit about me, just enough. They knew I had a fiance. They knew I had parents that I adored because I had conversations with them as they were sitting on their, we call it stoop, a
Mhm.
stoop in New Jersey steps. I knew them. I knew them. And I guess a testament to that was one day when I literally was outnumbered. I got jumped by folks on the other side of the street, which was another city, and I was outnumbered, and I was in a fight for my life at the time. And some of the baddest guys in the neighborhood defended me. I mean,
Mhm.
thank God they did. I mean, they were get off of him. He's ours. I mean, it
Mhm.
was, I went, that was a milestone.
Yeah.
This is years ago. Thanks a lot. I may have to lock you up tomorrow, but thanks a lot. You had my
Right.
back. I
Yeah.
knew everybody. We don't have that anymore.
Mhm.
We've lost that. We've become mechanized. Police cars, and so we got to work a little harder, I think, in putting the human back in humanity when it comes to police and the public.
Mhm.
So when we ask what a constituent or community member can do is get to know your cops, get to better understand what they do and what they go through. And no one says if a cop is bad that bad cop, that apple shouldn't be dealt with. Uh,
Mhm.
but get to know them, and we've lost that. We listen more to social media. There's no town center anymore, and the
Mhm.
police were a part of that town center. The town center is now social media platforms. Our police chiefs are just now really learning how to use those social media platforms to reach the constituents, and
Mhm.
that's important. It's not going to answer all of the questions about whether we humanize ourselves, even vis-a-vis through some social media platform, but
Mhm.
we have no choice. So the public better know your cops, better understand what they do that's right. And if there's 3 months where you don't hear anything from them, they're doing their job. It's
Mhm.
that one time. It's
Mhm.
that one time.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. So let's talk about some of your personal goals, short-term, long-term goals for the organizations and the groups that you're a part of. What are some of the things that you're working towards?
we're I think our biggest challenges right now in policing is putting human face back on who we are and doing the same for the public, not forgetting who they are, not forgetting why we took the job in the first place. Um, it's interesting. When I was a young cop, um, I wanted to I wanted to be a detective. I wanted to be a narc. I wanted to go to SWAT. I wanted to go to Intel. I wanted to kick down doors. I wanted to, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And in many cases, I did it. I did it. I accomplished it. But probably, and this will bring me to where we want to be now, probably the most satisfying part of my job, other than when I walked the beat, you already heard me talk about that, was really focusing on the community relations aspect of policing. And that's where we're spending a lot of our time right now. Community relations and policing sometimes were not commensurate with each other. If you mention community relations to a sergeant or to a lieutenant, there could have been an eye roller and go, oh, community relations. And community relations officers were not always supported out there. Um, there were times a decade or two ago where if you were in community relations, you probably ticked off the chief. And if you didn't have a fleet control big enough where they could send you, they would send you to community relations.
Mm.
And that is just contrary to
Mm.
policing. Contrary to policing. What I think most of our police executives who I've met, who are just, it's a very educated um, group of people. Most police executives have come to understand that your most important asset is your community relations officer. And if they're not given the support that they need, they are the feed, they are the bead on the community, they are the pulse. If you need to pick the right person for that job, and that person will save you lawsuits, potential loss of life, discredit of your agency. The community policing job, to me, is one of the most important jobs, on whether it's a 5-person department or a 5,000-person department. And it wasn't always viewed that way. They're the ones that are in heads first to a public order issue. They should be the ones head first into whether a community at large is suffering from hate crimes or whatever issue may be facing that community. So when I started, I said I desired to go to an actionable unit where I could use whatever I thought would be good policing skill sets. Um, my best days in policing were better understanding and having the opportunity to work in the community policing space.
Mhm.
And we are spending a tremendous amount of time on getting police executives culturally to better understand how important that is. They need the training, they need the support of their fellow officers, and they also need to be provided with the dividends of you may not get promoted unless you really do a good job in this community policing aspect.
Mhm.
So I can't say enough how important I believe that is. So the days of the kicking, look, we still got to kick down those doors sometimes because we have no choice. We still have to, the intel and all the rest of it. The SWAT is so important, but the community policing aspect is what will make or break a good police leader, a good police executive, and how they support those efforts within their department, and in particularly the people that are selected for those positions. So
Mhm.
that's a big focus for us in the future. Is the community policing piece and doing it from the ground up versus from the top down.
Mhm. And that's within the Miller Center. So,
Yep, that's what we're working on that. Plus, one of the things that we're doing now that we're very proud of is we we announced about 2 weeks ago at the I-95 working group the new public safety center for AI, and we are going to be very focused on building training, assisting departments with navigating through AI, better understanding AI, working as an intermediary between public safety and government, state governments, and federal government on what tools are needed, conducting working sessions and working groups on particular AI types of technologies, technologies that will advance or mature investigations, license plate readers, things of that nature. I mean, the future's here. The problem is that sometimes it moves so fast. It's a mystery. It becomes a mystery to our law enforcement executives, and we want to help demystify that. By no means are we the AI experts, but what we're doing is putting together and aggregating some of the best AI minds in the country to help our law enforcement executives navigate through those processes.
so would you say kind of where we are now with artificial intelligence and the large language models, is it similar to where we were, when you were looking at how crimes were changing in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and with, you know, music, video games, then social media? Are we in a place right now that we should be more concerned than we are? I mean, I know there's a lot of concern around AI, but what's the real threat in terms of our safety?
Well, that's a good question because it's a dual-edged sword. At the same time that our police executives, our chiefs, et cetera, our sheriffs need to better understand how AI can make their lives easier, recruitment, retention, AI is drones, AI in investigative accelerants that can take an investigation 2 days versus two months. These are going to be very favorable in the months ahead, particularly as if we continue down the path of retention and recruitment issues, because we're going to still need to protect our constituents. On the other hand, AI is being used by our adversaries, and sometimes a lot more sophisticated than what we're using. Uh, uh, um, you know, the there's just a plethora of how AI is being used against the public. Banking, financial. There was just a case recently where a Nigerian gang, and this is an issue and a problem for local police because it was international. A Nigerian gang created or used an AI tool to create a 15-year-old girl, and the gang member was moving his mouth, and it was moving the 15-year-old girl's mouth and saying exactly what he wanted it to say.
Mm.
They were enticing young young boys between the ages of 14 and 18 or 19. Take your clothes off, send me your pics. And these gang members were then going back to the family and extorting money from the families. 25 to 30 of these kids killed themselves.
Mm.
They took their own lives.
Wow.
And it was not understood how this was being done, you know? So deep fakes, I mean, we're going to see some real intriguing AI criminality that our officers are going to need to be trained immediately to understand. They're not going to be AI experts necessarily,
Mm.
but to understand how do we investigate this, and then the prosecutors are going to need to figure out how they're going to prosecute it. It's new. It's something that we haven't dealt with. And every day that we think we're trying to figure it out a little bit more, there's a new AI technology that comes out that I'll call them the adversaries, use. And it's not just gang members or sophisticated gangs or cartels, because the cartels are using AI now. Unbelievable. It's also Russians, Chinese, Iranians. They have messed with local police departments. The chiefs don't. I mean, this could be coming from China. This could be coming from St. Petersburg, Russia. And you could create a run on the bank like that.
Mm.
A police officer just shot somebody. Create the whole police officer. They now can take the face of one of their
Mhm.
officers and set this whole dynamic up. And we got to be prepared to counter this.
Mhm.
Question is, how do we keep up with it all? We're still dealing
Mhm.
with pickpockets,
Right.
domestics. We're
Right.
still dealing with quality of life crimes.
Yeah.
How do I deal with this? That's where
Right.
we come. We're,
And
we're
those
not the end
are
all. That's where you rely on your research facilities. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
right. Well, I was just thinking that it's hard to generate support for the resources law enforcement needs for those types of crimes because they're invisible, right, to the general public. They're not desecrated cemeteries, they're not murders. Um, so I imagine it's something that's going to be challenging for people to get the support they need to learn what they need to learn in order to combat those types of crimes.
So to your point, you asked what these think tanks are capable of doing. So you know, here's an example where once I'm off this podcast, what I
we're
think we're
we're
I
going to
think
keep you here forever,
no,
Paul.
no, no. I think what we're going to do, to your point, is assemble prosecutors, AI experts, and police, and hold a focus group for a day on AI criminality. The next whatever we call it, paradigm, and
Yep.
then and that's where we come in, and that's where we're helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we have no agenda. We're not selling anything. We're not trying to take, any. So there we assemble a group of people, prosecutors, police, detectives, investigators from both the Fed and local, and AI experts, and come out after a day with a report that says, all right, we don't have all the answers, but here's the problem. Here's some best practices, and maybe here's where we go from here.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the types of ways that we are helpful. The police executives are so busy doing what they're doing, and I mean this. God bless every one of them, and they're busy doing what they're doing, and what we try to do is try to say, hey, how can we take some of your concerns and be of assistance to you in a nonpartisan, non-threatening, no agenda matter, and that's what we try to achieve over at the Miller Center on Policing.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about the think tanks being more agile, faster, right? Because if officers are, if they're catching people, pickpocketing on the train, right? They're focused on street level crime that's still occurring, still affecting the quality of life in a community. Having a think tank get in front of these issues, come back to these departments and say, here's your next threat. This is what you need to deal with it. And here are the resources to be able to do that. That to me really illustrates the relationship between these policy centers and law enforcement departments. And it sounds like it's an essential relationship.
It's more important than ever today because everything's happening so rapidly. Social media is today. AI is today. Policing doesn't always keep up. Sometimes we're aircraft carriers in a river. We just can't move quick enough.
Right.
And that's not the fault of the department or the executive. It's the way it is. So I think we've got to be more creative. But I'm going to say something that, we've got to start picking our battles because police are not going to solve all the world's problems. We just don't look for us to do that. We just want to keep you safe.
Right.
We want to figure out the best way to keep you safe, and have the tools to do so. We're not picking any sides. And from time to time, there are going to be things that happen within our own ecosystem, and we're trying to deal with them the best we can. There's no perfection, but people expect perfection from the police. They can't get it. Not that we don't want to serve it, but you just can't get it. But what most people seem to forget is they only hear about us when things go bad. And it's not that often, and I always use that example: 1 million accountants, 1 million nurses, 1 million doctors, there's over 1 million of us. And take a look what we do every single day. So, I mean, again, I don't think any police leader is looking for a break when a bad cop goes bad. But take a look at those numbers. So, right now, I believe that many people are swinging back again. I'm being optimistic and better understanding how important we are, and that we are not that clique of a putting on a light bulb and always knowing that light bulb is going to go on. I mean, we're human beings. So we've got to be treated as such.
Yep. Well, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Paul, this has been a pleasure. I don't want to take any more of your.
We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the community. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. The Icon series is not just about contemporary figures in the law enforcement community, but about all those who have served their communities and the world, from now and in the past. Be sure to tune back in with us for future Icons episodes to learn about key figures in American law enforcement history. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.